He's a generational keynote speaker who's been helping organizations bridge the generational gaps over 10 years. Scott explores the pop culture moments that help define each generation with his interactive game show. Get ready to compete for prizes and show off your pop culture skills. Please welcome to the main stage, Scott Zimmer.
I found there's one thing every single generation can seem to agree on. The pop culture of their era was the best. Tell me which of these two things is older, the Slinky or Judge Judy's shine lamp? Carla, what do we think?
I'm going for the Slinky.
You're gonna go with the Slinky? Carla! I'm gonna ask a question. You're gonna write down your answer without your partner seeing. If your answers match, that is a point for your generation. The most embarrassing style trend of your generation's youth.
Really high platform shoes.
Platform shoes! Boomers got a point! Yes! Nice job! They were both so humble about it, just platform shoes. Popular boy band.
One Direction.
One Direction?
One Direction.
One Direction. Nice job. NSYNC? Oh! These are 50-50, Henry. Come on. Ladies and gentlemen.
When it comes to this topic, everyone can relate to it because at one point or another, everyone in here has said to themselves, oh, kids today. Or, man, old people, they just don't get it. We've all had that moment where we fail to connect with another generation. We fail to get on the same page. What works for recruiting, retaining, motivating, engaging one generation doesn't always work with another. In fact, oftentimes it can be the very thing that turns another generation off. And too often when we encounter these different generational clashes, right away we go to a negative place. We stereotype, we focus in on how we're different, we get frustrated, we think about who's maybe acting like an entitled brat, or not that anyone in here has ever thought that, or who needs to get with the times, rather than just find ways where we can bring our different generational perspectives and ideas and talents to the table to get the job done. And that's what today's gonna be all about.
I have to say, as much as I wish I was there with you today in the same room delivering this great content, it's kind of cool being part of this really awesome virtual summit. So thank you so much for having me today, and thank you for being here.
I'll give you a quick little rundown. First of all, one of the big game changers for Gen X was the explosion of and our consumption of all things media. We saw the birth of cable news, cable television, MTV. I mean, we were the first generation in our formative years to have access to more than just 5 channels. I'm telling you, August 1st, 1981, MTV debuts. That was a big deal for our generation. And for me, I gotta tell you, when I wanted to see my favorite music video, you just turn on the TV and you waited until they played it. I couldn't go to YouTube or Vivo. I just had to sit there and wait. You know what was really discouraging? I would sit there and just think in the back of my head, I hope it didn't play right before I turned on the TV.
These opinions can make a real difference in how we see each other, talk to each other, and work with each other, which is generational expert Scott Zimmer's specialty.
We call them clash points, which just means we're approaching the same thing a little bit differently, and it can create a little bit of tension.
Millennials, do me a favor. How do you think other generations describe you, if they had to pick a word? Entitled. Folks, if this were the Family Feud, entitled is always the #1 answer on the board. I heard spoiled. What else? Lazy. I always have to remind people, they can hear you. They know what you're saying. The perception in the media and by other generations is profoundly negative. I talked about that generational pride boomers share. Millennials, on the other hand, the ones I interview, they tend to distance themselves from the term. Or they qualify it somehow. Yeah, I'm a millennial, but I show up on time and I work hard. Or I'm a millennial, but I really don't believe in labels. Or I'm a millennial, but I'm on the older end, so I just count myself as Gen X. We have a whole generation of young, talented people who feel they have to apologize simply for when they were born. It's the organizations, the companies, the managers, the supervisors who are working past these negative stereotypes to get to the heart of who this generation is and how they want to approach work. Those are the ones who are having the most success with engagement, recruitment, and retaining that young talent. Because
the number one mistake I'm seeing companies make when it comes to connecting with this generation is that they're just treating them like millennials, or they're millennials 2.0, or millennials the sequel. They're not millennials. If 2020 wasn't already shocking enough, here's a stat for you. The oldest millennials this year are turning 40 years old. Let that sink in. They're 40. They're not the new kids coming through the doors. They're already established in their careers. Gen Z grew up during a completely different time, during a completely different set of circumstances, different formative experiences that shaped who they are and what their expectations are when it comes to the workplace. Here are just a few of the traits they're bringing with them into the workplace. They're industrious, they're inquisitive, they're pragmatic, they're socially conscious, and they are risk averse. And all of these different traits look a lot different when we're connecting virtually as opposed to in person. So today, I want to give you 4 strategies you can use, each and every one of you can use, to better connect with this generation during these difficult times. Because while the health and the well-being of your industry and your company is so important, the health and well-being of your team is also important.
One of the tips I give them is this. Think in terms of evolution versus revolution when you share your thoughts and ideas. Evolution versus revolution. Evolution really means to build upon, to grow, to make better. Revolution means to completely do away with and start over.
Look at on the farm. Look at what the inside of a tractor looked like when you were growing up. Look at what an inside of a tractor looks like today. Not to again sound like Grandpa Scott, but I was lucky growing up if I got to drive the tractor that had the AM/FM radio on the wheel well. Let alone XM radio, heated seats, iPads, self-steering tractors. It is insane the amount of change and evolution that has happened just in your industry, in agriculture and farming, within the confines of the millennials' formative years. You're a generation that experienced a rate of change unlike any other generation before you.
What happens if you are smack dab in the middle? What happens if you got one foot in one generation and one foot in the other? What happens if you're born in late 1964 or early 1980? You're what we call a cusper. So I know it's a very technical term.
I was giving a speech, and a young man comes up to me. He had to be 23 years old. He was very young. And he's like, that was great. My boss is a baby boomer. The guy hates me, so this is gonna come in handy. And I said, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm sure your boss doesn't hate you, by the way. I thought he was being a little dramatic about the whole thing. And he looks at me and he thought about that for a second. And he goes, no, I'm pretty sure he hates me. And I couldn't help it. I was being nosy. I said, well, is he here? Point him out. So I make my way over and we're at the bar and I slip it into the conversation. I say, oh, by the way, I met somebody on your team earlier. I met so-and-so. And he looks at me and goes, oh yeah? So-and-so? I hate that kid. And that's such a shame when these moments happen because all these great opportunities for mentorship, for reverse mentorship, they don't happen when we just don't like each other.
This is a generation that redefined every single life stage that they've touched. They redefined youth culture. They completely redefined the workplace, and today they're redefining retirement and what it means to grow older. Every single life stage, boomers have put their own stamp on.
People sometimes think that millennials will just become boomers as they get older, and that's not the case. The traits that boomers have today that we really see stand out are the ones they developed when they were young. So it's a matter of understanding these different approaches.
Your company's history and where you're going and what you've accomplished and what that means for the future, it's pretty mind-blowing, and every person I talked to before I came here today talked about the important work they do and how they'd love to see on a client's face when they sit down and figure out what are your needs, how many hospital beds are we talking about, what is that, what can I do for you? It just motivates people so much. But the difference is for millennials, they want to know on day one, how is the work I'm doing making a difference?
When it comes to effective generational communication, it's not about age. It's not about old versus young. It's not about right or wrong. It's about understanding that each and every single generation is bringing something different, unique, and important to the table. And it's up to you as leaders and mentors to tap into that. Thank you folks so much. I appreciate it.